Hello and welcome to a new episode of Tech Talk on Trust TV, where we talk technology. This week, we'll be taking a closer look at funding challenges in the tech ecosystem, with a focus on President Tinubu's policies. Joining us in the program for expert opinion is Faiz Mohammed. He's a digital entrepreneurship and transformation expert who specializes in technology policy and also the executive director of Blue Sapphire Hub. Before then, let's take a report on today's topic of discussion. My name is Dorcas Yakubu Zallah. You're watching Tech Talk on Trust TV. In recent years, Nigeria's tech ecosystem has emerged as one of the most promising in Africa, attracting both local and international investors. However, funding remains one of the critical challenges for startups and established tech companies alike. With President Tinubu's administration bringing a new wave of policy changes, the landscape for tech funding in Nigeria is undergoing a shift. While the government's policies aim to improve the broader economic environment, there are several key funding challenges that the tech sector must navigate in light of these reforms. Currency volatility and inflation is one of many challenges. The government's decision to allow the naira to float more freely on the foreign exchange markets has led to significant fluctuations in the currency's value. For tech startups that rely on foreign investment or international partnerships, this presents a major hurdle. Another challenge is access to venture capital. Despite a growing number of tech startups in Nigeria, access to venture capital (VC) remains limited. President Tinubu's administration has made strides in promoting the digital economy through initiatives such as the National Digital Economy Policy and Strategy (NDEPS). However, much of the investments the Nigerian startups receive is concentrated in a few high-profile sectors like fintech, e-commerce, and health tech. These and many more are the funding challenges bedeviling the tech ecosystem. While President Tinubu's policies offer potential improvements for Nigeria's tech ecosystem, significant funding challenges remain. Addressing these issues will require a multifaceted approach with stronger collaboration between the government, the private sector, and international investors. Many thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining us, you're watching Tech Talk on Trust TV. We now have in the studio with us Faiz Mohammed. And as I said earlier, he's a digital entrepreneurship and transformation expert who specializes in technology policy and also the executive director of Blue Sapphire Hub. You're very much welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Dorcas.
All right, so let's start with the first question here, which is let's talk about the policies of the current, government, President Tinubu's policies. How does this affect funding for the tech ecosystem?
It's actually very interesting. It's a mixed bag because one of the benefits of devaluing the currency that has happened with the naira is that investors will now look at the economy and think, okay, the naira has been artificially lifted for the past several years, and now we have a better idea of what its actual value is. Maybe now we can properly invest and have a clearer idea of what the return on investment will be. On the other hand, with the naira being very volatile in its devaluation, continuously losing 10%, 12%, 30% in the past 5 months actually of its value, that makes an investor skeptical. Makes them think, okay, we have a currency here that is continuously volatile. And that makes it much more difficult for an investor to say that I can invest my funds into this particular startup or this particular venture and have that be a successful one when the return on investment is continuously coming down. So it's a mixed bag. I think the biggest effect other than that is also when you look at local funding. Let's think about government initiatives. I think the government has done commendable work in the past several years trying to fund initiatives within the ecosystem, either through NITDA or ONDAI or several other initiatives that the federal government is trying. But one of the issues that you have now is that because the naira has been devalued so much, the loans or the funding that is being given to these startups or to these entrepreneurs don't have as much value as they used to have on the market. So I can do effectively far less with the money that I'm given than I used to be able to, which makes it much more difficult for a startup who has taken loans from the government to be able to pay back at a consistent rate. And even if a startup has been given a grant, that makes it difficult for them to now meet up with the expectations of either their customers or their investors, because the money just isn't what it used to be.
So in essence, what you're trying to say is, the floating of the naira and, the naira devaluation has affected the tech ecosystem.
Very deeply.
So
yes.
talking about the negative aspects of this, what about the pros? Like in everything, you'd still have to find a way to navigate, through. What do you think these tech ecosystems, tech entrepreneurs, what do you think they should do in order to navigate these waters?
So I think one of the best things to do is to look at your operations and find in ways which you can really maximize and reduce the cost. A very simple example is being able to go green or go clean energy efficient. Right? If you think about the amount of money that is spent by innovation hubs, by base stations, telecommunication centers, simply to fuel generators in order to have a consistent supply of power, you'll see that the operational costs skyrocket, especially now that the cost of fuel has become so high. Now, if you were to pivot into a more energy efficient operation, solar panels, inverters, you will find that you've now reduced the cost of your operations by such a degree that you can divert the savings into new programs, new initiatives, new product development, new services. I think that's one easy way of doing it. The other thing is really looking to identify what is your beachhead market. A beachhead market is basically those particular customers or that particular segment of your customers that you're going to be able to reach much more efficiently, much more quickly. And it's from that beachhead market that you're now able to grow and expand your business. Most people think, okay, I should have my services open to everyone, but not everyone wants your business. Not everyone is able to afford your business. So you have to look at those particular customers, that particular customer segment that best serves your needs, and focus on them as being your primary target.
All right, so back to the person of interest. President Bola Tinubu has emphasized diversification of the economy.
Right.
How does this affect the tech ecosystem?
Well, diversification is a buzzword that we hear very much when it comes to macroeconomic theory, when it comes to the tech ecosystem itself. There's a lot of talk about diversifying your portfolio as an investor into different sectors of the tech ecosystem. There's a lot of talk about diversifying your operations and the type of startups and businesses that you are putting into the public. So one of the interesting aspects of this is that the tech ecosystem is one part of the Nigerian economy that can most help diversify the Nigerian economy. Because it is divided into so many subsectors, whether that's financial technology or health technology or agri-tech, you have so many different sectors of the economy that are equally dependent on technology as the tech ecosystem itself. And if we can find a way to incentivize not just investment but capacity building within each of these sectors, the sky's the limit for how much every sector of the economy can grow with the help of the tech ecosystem behind it.
So earlier you applauded the government for playing their own parts in establishments like NIDA and the rest. What role do you think government should play in financing and facilitating infrastructure development, especially for tech companies? And there's been this argument that the focus has always been on fintech and all of that. So what advice do you have for them? How do you think they should diversify this financial support?
Well, the focus has been on fintech because it has been traditionally the most successful sector when it comes to the tech ecosystem. There are many factors for that. Being in Lagos, which is the commercial center of the country, having access to digital infrastructure that is not necessarily as readily available in the rest of the country, and then Nigeria being such an untapped, unbanked market. makes it much easier for the fintech ecosystem to really grow versus other sectors of the economy. But I think you have to look at both regional disparities and economic priorities, and say, okay, which sectors do we need to focus on as a matter of economic priority? So while the fintech sector may be very successful in a place like Lagos, you could look at the agri-tech sector for the northern part of the country. There is a very large, very diverse economic story when it comes to the agricultural sector in Nigeria. But I do think that it is behind the pale when it comes to commercial mechanized farming. And that is somewhere that both agricultural technology experts and the government can work together to really bring up the strength of the economy there. I think the government, again, is doing, has a good plan as to increasing the scope of digital infrastructure within the country. But I do think that there is a lot of focus, currently at least, on urban areas, which makes sense because that is where the economic bases are. But if you really want to connect Nigeria in its totality, and if you want to bring about opportunities that are not currently available for the majority of Nigerians, you have to look at rural areas, really. And you have to look at areas where they don't traditionally have access to internet capabilities, where digital infrastructure is really bare bones, and bringing them into the national ecosystem is really what's going to increase the number of people on the grid, and increase the size of the digital ecosystem, so that you have not just a increased customer base, but also a larger number of people who are now plugged into the system and can create innovative solutions for its diversification.
So let's talk migration. You'd agree with me that recently Nigeria is experiencing, brain drain of skilled tech experts.
Definitely.
How can Nigeria retain this tech expert here? And it's not just the tech ecosystem, it's almost like that everywhere. So what do you think the government can do to retain these skilled experts in the country?
Well, really, it's down to two things, and this is tied into what we spoke about earlier, that has to do with the devaluation and volatility of the naira. Not too long ago.
Do you think that's the main issue?
I think that's the primary issue.
Okay.
Yes. Not too long ago, if you were earning a respectable amount within the tech ecosystem, so let's say around 2015. You were earning 250,000 naira. That was equivalent to about $3,200. $3,200 today is millions of naira. It's almost 4 million naira, 4 million naira plus. So you can see just how much of a downturn there has been with regards to the value of the naira itself. And when you have a very skilled youth population, especially, who have done the work of really building their capacity when it comes to digital skills, everything from cybersecurity to data analysis and project management and UI UX design. When you have a youth population that's interested in these things and has done the work of upskilling themselves, it's very difficult to tell them not to take up a job in a foreign entity who is offering them 6 times, 7 times, 12 times the amount of compensation that they would get if they continue to work within Nigeria. What does that tell you? It tells you that more than anything, what people are looking for is a standard of living and a compensation that is going to keep them comfortable. And unless you can do something to stabilize the naira such that when people look at the cost of moving abroad versus the cost of being paid the same amount in Nigeria, it just makes much more sense to stay in Nigeria. I also think that the government has a lot of work to do with ensuring a pipeline between academia and industry. We have a problem with this in this country whereby we don't necessarily produce the sort of graduates, the sort of knowledge content that will automatically then feed into the economy and help it grow. So what we need to do is focus on those particular aspects of, the modern workforce that require help, that require people. Make sure that that is what the universities and the schools are really working for. And not just the universities. A lot of the education starts from secondary school. Make sure there's a pipeline that builds from secondary school all the way into university, all the way into NYSC, and then can find a pathway for them into the industry. So I think that is missing to a large extent from the federal government perspective, and it's something that needs to be focused on, because those two things, having strong compensation and then matching the skills for the future of work to the skill sets that are being produced within our centers of knowledge, is the only way really that we're going to see a drop within that brain drain.
So let's talk about government initiatives aimed at supporting tech startups. How accessible are these initiatives, the grants, the funds? How accessible are they to the tech startups, and what can be done to make it better, to make it more accessible?
I think to a large extent the issue that I think government agencies would be facing when it comes to reaching out to these startups is twofold. First is that Nigeria being so large and the tech ecosystem growing exponentially over the past several years, they don't necessarily have information on everyone. They don't know how many startups there are in any particular state, how many innovation hubs there are in any particular region. They don't necessarily have all of that data. So it's something that would have to be volunteered by these private actors with the help of NITDA and ONDAI and NCARE, so that they can have a database for all of these actors, which would make it much more easier to design programs for their benefit and much more easier to funnel funds in their direction. But I do think that there is a lack of information, not so much it's not so much that these programs, these support programs don't exist. They do exist. But how many people, how many businesses, how many startups, how many entrepreneurs are aware of them? Some of that has to do with the fact that these government programs aren't sending the right message to the right audience. You need to be reaching a particular demographic. For example, if you're looking to fund people who are interested in the creative economy, people who are interested in growing content development or graphic design or any of these things, you're looking at a certain youth demographic. You're looking at people between the ages of 18 to around 25. Now, if your messaging isn't reaching those particular people, you will have the program, you will send out missives, nobody's going to hear it. What platforms are you using to reach them? What incentives are you talking about when you're sending out these messages? It's the same thing when you're talking about regional disparities. You have to be in a situation whereby the information about these programs is being given to people in their local dialects, in their local contexts, in ways that they can understand. And this is the only way through which the vast majority of the country is going to have enough information with regarding government programs that they want to be able to take part. I know, for example, about the Nigerian Youth Fund, Nigerian Youth Investment Fund, I think.
Of which so many youths don't even know about.
So many youths don't know about. Very recently it closed, I think, the application line closed. And people were reaching out to me asking me about, what are the options we have for startup financing, for business development. And I said, this program just closed. Didn't you hear about it? They said, no, they didn't even know it existed. And that's really a result of mismatched messaging. The government might have messaging for the general public, but then the general public is divided into so many subcategories, and you have to be able to target each one of those so that they know exactly what it is that's available to them.
So on the part of the government, probably they didn't really blow the trumpet loud enough.
No, they didn't.
Okay, so do you think the public and the private sectors should, collaborate to make this funding available to tech startups?
Most certainly. I think the most successful ventures when it comes to business development in Nigeria are always public-private partnerships.
Okay.
The private sector is much more attuned to what's happening on the ground and the realities of the market. The government is there for its regulatory duties, and being able to have a system that reaches all across the country. So I think when you merge those two together, you're able to get a much more comprehensive package that is suitable to the growth of innovative potential across the country. I think there are already several that exist. The BOI is doing good work. We already mentioned NITDA and how it's working with several international development partners and even local partners such as the ISN, that is the Innovation Support Network, to really grow the technology and our entrepreneurship system within Nigeria. Of course, there's much more that can be done. I do think that while there are overtures made for funding, there also needs to be much more than just a funding drive. What can be done in terms of capacity development? What can be done in terms of, policy alignment? You have situations whereby a startup or a business might want to go into a particular sector, but they're hampered so much by a certain regulatory doorway. They're hampered by a lack of regulation or a non-existent policy sometimes. And I think those things have to be tied together by the private and public sectors in order to have a really strong ecosystem moving forward.
So now talking about the global scale, in what ways do you think the Nigerian government should, assist startups in expanding beyond the local market to become competitive on a global scale?
That's a tough one, you see, because I think for the most part,
the tech startups do the most of the work?
Yes, I think the government doesn't need to do much more than ensure that the opportunities exist, ensure that international development partners or international investors have the opportunity to come into Nigeria, see what is available, and invest. That means ensuring that their investment opportunities are favorable. That means ensuring that the macroeconomic environment and the business environment are favorable for investors. Once that is in place, I think the tech ecosystem has proved that it's able to attract foreign investment, especially on its own. Currently, you see a situation whereby the funding for the tech ecosystem has come down significantly versus 3 years ago, in fact, even last year. Nigeria has been the highest investment destination for the tech ecosystem for about 4, maybe 5 years running. This year, I think we dropped to 3rd or 4th place, if I'm not mistaken. There's a lot of talk about that being as a result of the poor macroeconomic conditions, or the fact that there have been a lot of Nigerian startups who have received seed funding but have then failed, haven't been able to really successfully scale their businesses. But I think what it actually is a realignment of investor priorities and the realities on the ground. You look at what happened during COVID, and because the rest of the market was closed off, you had a lot of investors looking at startups and entrepreneurs and saying, we should fund this. And so a lot of money was going into these startups. A lot of money was going into the system because that was the best way to get things moving at that point. So now, 4 years after the pandemic, what you're seeing is really a realignment whereby investors are looking at and taking stock of what investments have taken place and really gauging which ones have been successful and which ones were really an overstep in terms of how much money was given in that way. I don't think it's a Nigerian problem. I think it's a worldwide problem. Everywhere, every tech ecosystem is going through certain challenges that have to do with global inflation. But I think that those are growing pains that will subside in time. The important thing is that the economic environment remains stable enough that investors can look to Nigeria and still think, okay, there's enough innovation potential, there's enough of a market, and there are enough ideas within this market that it's still a worthy investment destination.
Sounds like a call to the government.
It is.
All right, Mr. Faiz, thank you so much for coming to the program.
Thank you for having me.
And sharing your insights too.
No problem.
We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, the program continues. Do stay with us. Tech Tips will be giving you a few practical tips that entrepreneurs and companies in Nigeria's tech ecosystem can consider in light of the current funding challenges and government policies. Step 1. Diversify funding sources. Given the challenges with venture capital, consider seeking non-dilutive funding options such as government grants, innovation prizes, and competition-based funding. These sources can help you scale without giving away equity. Step 2. Optimize currency and inflation risks. If your startup is reliant on foreign investment or payment, consider setting up a foreign currency account to mitigate the risks of currency fluctuations and inflation. This way, you can hold some of your capital outside of the volatile naira and reduce potential losses. Step 3. Capitalize on government initiatives. Take full advantage of tax incentives for tech startups and businesses in the digital economy. Nigeria's government has introduced programs like the Technology Development Fund (TDF) and the National Economic and Recovery Growth Plan (NERGP) that could offer tax breaks and other financial benefits. Step 4. Strengthen infrastructure and operations cloud-based solutions. Given Nigeria's infrastructural challenges, moving your operations to the cloud is a smart choice. Cloud platforms like AWS and Google Cloud can provide affordable, scalable, and reliable hosting, reducing the need for expensive physical infrastructure. Step 5. Enhance talent retention and development. With the growing trend of remote work, you can access a global talent pool. By offering flexible work conditions, you can attract and retain skilled professionals, reducing the need for expensive expatriate talent while still filling key technical roles. And finally, Step 6. Focus on regional and global expansion. A Nigerian tech ecosystem can benefit from expanding beyond the local markets. Leverage regional opportunities in other African countries where tech ecosystems are growing rapidly. Developing a product or service that can be scaled across Africa increases the potential market size and attractiveness to investors. And this is where we draw the curtains today. Do well to follow us across all our social media platforms for more programs, news, and documentaries. My name is Dorcas Yakubu Zallah. Thanks for watching.